Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Western Spirit. Today, we have a very interesting and special guest, Sameer Khosla. Right, I said that right.
That's absolutely right.
He's the chairman and CEO of Dynamic, which is a company that works in human resources, bringing workers and people who want to work from India to other countries. And in our specific, and they're the biggest in India, the biggest company
That's right.
that works in that field. And specifically today, we're meeting in right near Tel Aviv in Israel. And the reason why we're speaking is because you are the biggest private company that provides human resources workers from India who want to work out inside Israel. And the reason why it's very interesting at this point is that up until October 7th, we had the Israeli economy was basically a lot of it relied on Palestinian workers, labor. And after that, because of security reasons, different geopolitical reasons, the workforce from the Palestinians went way down. And so we needed a lot of workers. And one of the main places that the Israeli government looked at was India. And so it's a pleasure and honor to have you here because this is a very important subject also for the local economy here, but I think global repercussions for, countries that have these types of dilemmas. So
Yes,
thank you for being with us.
And thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it. My first question is about India in itself. Before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of the workers, is after October 7th, I'm from the US, originally New York, Brooklyn, New York. We saw right next door tons of protests and anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff. One of the only countries that I really haven't seen anything to the contrary. We've seen people supporting us and offering condolences after October 7th and really being very loving people to Israel was India. And now we also see through your company, people want to come work here. They feel some sort of connection also besides the business part of it. So maybe give us a little bit insights. Why does the Indian people so much support us? Why did we not see the hatred that we saw in other places all over the world?
Ariel, it's a very interesting question. It demands a very nuanced and considered answer. Allow me some time as I explain this because I think a lot of people are searching for explanations to this question. I'm reminded of a speech that was given by Mark Regev, in which even it was news to me when I heard the speech, where he said that India is the only country where historically there has not been any systemic anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So as a first introduction to the answer to this question, we have to start with that premise that there's something materially different about India and the way India looks at Jewish people or even Israel. Secondly, and maybe I'd like to, I'm a big lover of movies. And there's, I think in this context, one of the best movies that explains, to some extent, gives you some analysis of why we are in this position. And not only about why India looks at Israel a certain way, but why other people might be looking at Israel in another way. There's a movie called Rashomon. It's a Akira Kurosawa movie. It was released in 1950. And the premise of the movie is there's a murder of a Japanese nobleman in a forest. And the movie revolves around 4 witness accounts of the same facts, but each witness account has certain irreconcilable differences. And these witness accounts are shaped by the perspectives of the people giving these witness accounts. Like yourself, I've lived in North America for a long time. I've lived in Europe. I've lived in the Middle East. I lived in Dubai for many years. And the Indian perspective on this is quite different from many other countries. And now we get into why. Israel was founded in 1948. Just 1 year prior, India gained its independence. I for Israel, I for India, P for Palestine, P for Pakistan. Pakistan was created out of India.
Right.
And we had the benefit of having the same map maker who created your maps and our maps, which was Great Britain. And they make the best maps.
Yes.
Wherever they've made maps, it works well,
Very well.
So if you look at the pattern of history, India, upon independence, accepted the partition borders of India. Even though Pakistan was created out of India, we as people of India accepted this as our borders, and we should move forward, look forward from this. Pakistan did not. Pakistan immediately attacked India, and in our history has proceeded to attack us several times. And Pakistan sees things from a different perspective. India is looking forward, and that's perhaps one of the reasons that we are now a global top 5 economy and the fastest growing country in the world. We look forward. We're not looking backwards. Other folks might be looking backwards in our neighborhood and want to revert to an older state, which we're not reconciled with them on. Similarly and I cannot pretend to be an expert on Israel and Palestine affairs, but there's a similar history here where the partitions were never accepted. And then we go to a deeper layer as I've come to Israel, and I arrived in Israel for the first time on November 15, 2023. And just after the terror attacks, and I've learned a lot during this time, but still learning every day, something new. I realized a great similarity just in my personal context, a great similarity between the story of my family and many Jewish families. And what's that story? My family lived in a city called Lahore for hundreds of years. It was a majority Hindu city. And one fine day, just before the partition, weeks before the partition, the British decided to put that city into Pakistan. And at its inception, Pakistan was supposed to be a secular state, very inclusive. However, if you visit the history, which I won't touch because these are sensitive subjects, all I can say is my family, my forefathers, ancestors, we had to run for our lives. My father was a child. They crossed the border. We lost many people. They lost a lot of people. And they came to India as refugees purely with the shirts on their back. When I talk to many of my friends who are Mizrahis or from different parts of the world, Separdis, it's a very similar story. So there is a very shared kinship inside India with people. So it resonates with us, this effect that's happened. And many people in India can appreciate the experience of the Jewish people. Doesn't mean that other people don't have similar or contrasting experiences, but in our context, we've understood it because we were all formed in a post-colonial environment. And
does it also, if I can stop you for 1 second,
sure.
I remember the terrorist attack in Bombay or Mumbai, I don't know which ones, everybody says it differently, but I remember one of the places which was attacked, there was the Jewish Chabad synagogue at the time.
Yes.
I actually know the family of the rabbi that died because I grew up with him at the time when I grew up in a Hasidic community. I don't look like that now. But so is there a sort of also understanding because of the things that we've obviously with Pakistan and these terrorist attacks that also came, by the way, I think from Pakistan, the terrorists and all this type of thing, there's a sort of also just a basic understanding of what Israel has to, reconcile with here, just in terms of the security situation and the barbarians that we're both fighting, both of our cultures together.
So how I would respond to this is as follows. The difference between India and Israel, and we're both, ancient cultures. India is an ancient culture. I would argue India is the last surviving ancient civilization.
Yes.
Many Israelis are in India doing yoga and meditation, Indians have been doing these things for thousands of years, right? So, as two ancient civilizations, the difference between Israel and India is that I came to realize with these type of terror attacks, from wherever they may come, Israel faces an existential threat. India, I don't believe faces an existential threat. So now, when we look at the Mumbai attacks in context, they deeply hurt and they left a deep wound in India. It hurted the pride of a lot of Indians. It hurted the feelings of a lot of Indians. These memories are with us because it was very public. It was broadcast live, and it left a very deep wound.
Yeah.
India didn't respond. India tries to operate within the bounds of international laws, as I've noticed that Israel is attempting its best to do. And India didn't resort to some kind of underhanded terrorist kind of approaches. India has dealt with this matter in the bounds of international laws, but at the same time, this is a very important point, because when I talk to people in India about my visits to Israel and how is it, this incident about Mumbai that you mentioned is always something that's in the context for Indians, right? The other thing I would just like to mention very briefly is our culture. I'm very blessed to be born in India. Our culture is a very open-minded culture. A lot of people find it very complex. We have a lot of gods, and if you start analyzing, it's not so different from many other things. But one of the things is we're very open-minded people. And that's why we have a country today where we have 220 million Indian Muslims. We have Parsis, Zoroastrians who came from Iran. They have thrived. One of the biggest business families, Tatas, they're of Zoroastrian origin. So India has been a great, the Hindu population of India is almost 1.3 billion people. They've been open-minded. They've been very accepting, and so we don't look at things through polarized lenses. We look at people, countries on the basis of their merits. And I think one of the things that I've come to recognize is, as a person, I've lived in 4 continents, there's a lot of similarity also. So the appreciation of India for Israel comes from an appreciation of Israeli culture and the people. A lot of core tenets of our cultural fabric are very similar to Israeli culture. Family is the most important thing. Education is important. Working, the value of hard work, meritocracy, these are very important points in our culture, but they are drilled into us. And I find when we'll talk about my journey here in Israel. I know a lot of Israelis, and I find many of them are wired in the same way, and that's probably within those things which I have said lies the answer, where, as I said about the movie, that one of 4 perspectives, our perspective can see it in a certain way where it resonates with us.
And I'll also just say that one of the things that I've seen, I think we've, in the West, and this is just to finish, and then we'll get to the business and the social aspect of who are the people that are coming here, why are they coming here, what do they find when they come here, what kind of difficulties. So, but before that, I just one thing that I think comes into our conversation is the victim mentality that's taking over the West. So one of the things, as someone, you said you lived in the West, in Europe, in America, you can appreciate the fact that the younger generations of people in the West, there's a sort of people have come to embrace being a victim from every walk of life. People think it's a virtue to be a victim. And one of the things that I think that both Israel and India have is that in Israel, people are not trying to be victims. Like you said, working hard. If you start off in a bad position, you're trying to get out of it through your own meritocracy, your own merit, your own, content of your character, as Martin Luther King said. And I think that's also true for India. There used to be a lot of times India is known as a caste system, but nowadays modern India is somewhere where people come from the bottom and make it to the top, like where you grew up and look where you are now, for example. So I think in that sense, the West, a lot of the West is going backwards, looking to show how poor and how much people hate them and this and that, and we are both our cultures trying to put that on the side and work hard. So I think that's something that we'll also talk about through the workers who are coming here.
Sure.
So maybe let's start.
If I could say something on this, and I feel it's an important point. One of the lines I have is 7 billion people, 7 billion journeys. We're all citizens of this planet. We're all entitled to do what we like and see things the way we like. Um, Coming from an Indian context, I can only speak about that because
Right.
even though I've lived in other places, I haven't been immersed in those cultures enough to speak as one of those cultures. But from what you've said, there's some very important points that are embedded in what you've said. And one of the important points is that, I will, to make it authentic, I'll just give you the family example of my family. My family lost everything. We were a very wealthy family, multi-generational wealth family. And when my ancestors were living in Lahore, they left everything behind. And the thing that saved my family was just the gold that my grandmother brought, just her jewelry.
Wow.
And they all started from scratch, and the stories of my father, who became a tremendous business tycoon. He was in a school where he sat on the floor. This is how he learned. So when we talk about in this context, what's embedded deep inside, and what I find very interesting, and it resonates with me with a lot of my friends in Israel, is my dad fought 2 wars between India and Pakistan, and some skirmishes. As a family who lost people, who lost their livelihood, we were never taught to look behind. My father never had a bad thing to say about Pakistan, I would often say to him that, maybe we'll go back one day, and his only answer was, why?
Right.
There's no reason to go back. We're here now. So think about where we are going next. Don't think about where we came from.
Exactly.
We know where we came from. It's gone.
And living with resentment isn't a healthy approach to being successful.
And you hit it on the head.
Yeah.
We were not raised with resentment. We were raised with love. India is a culture of love, and we were just taught what's happened. We, especially in our Indic culture, in the Hindu culture, fate is a big thing. Karma is a big thing.
Right.
We believe that those who do bad things, they will get taken care of themselves. We don't need to take care of them. And fate is that it's happened.
Yeah. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of with our situation here. So
Sure.
October 7th happens. When did you realize, first of all, when did you understand what was happening more or less? And when did you realize that you had a role to play here?
So, of course, October 7th flashed across our screens globally, and it was a shock and horror scenario as we read about what had happened. And as you said, we view it through the lens of Mumbai. Right. Terrorists running through our streets, gunning down people. We have seen this. So immediately there was flashbacks for a lot of people of Mumbai, right? And as a business till that point, separately from the company, which is the context where we're discussing, one of the companies I founded in my career is a technology company, and it's based out of New York, and we have about 1,000 employees between India and New York. That organization represents 4 Israeli unicorns in India. And one of them is not too far away. SimilarWeb and Give a Time is one of for 5 years, we've worked closely with them to develop the Indian market. So we had good knowledge and good relations with India, but we'd never worked in the blue-collar business because blue-collar business was only open for Meta palettes or for the caregivers in Israel. So when we looked at what's flashing across the screens, we didn't necessarily, we had a lot of sympathy, empathy for the people of Israel, but there was no notion of any business opportunity associated with this. Shortly after these events, and our company being one of the largest companies and the oldest company out of India in this business, we have great relations with our government. We have a phenomenal government. They're very, very...
in India.
In India, they're very clued in what's happening globally. Our foreign ministry, they're very sharp people. Our embassies, they're very, very sharp guys. So immediately we were notified. And as a large company, we were notified that the government of Israel is now considering bringing in people from the private channel. And we were encouraged to go and seek out opportunities in Israel. And I remember my brother, this is a company, our father passed, unfortunately, a few years ago. And my brothers and I, we own the company. And I remember chatting with my brother because on one side you have the government guys telling us there's you need to go to Israel, and on the other side we look at the television and there's fire raining down from the skies of Tel Aviv, and we're scratching our heads saying
Who's going to want to come?
Yeah, so we told our contacts that maybe we're going on vacation in December. After January maybe we'll go, and their answer was no, you need to go now. So actually I would have come in October, but my birthday was on the 1st of November, so my family insisted that I go after my birthday. So I arrived here.
Don't endanger your life before your birthday.
Yeah, okay, that's what they said. Like, at least have a birthday
Stay alive
before you go.
Yeah.
So I arrived there in the second week of November with an open mind and frankly not expecting much business. I just came on an exploratory visit. My ticket was booked for 4 days, and I thought I'll come check it out because we've been in this business for 50 years, and Israel has not been a blip on our radar screen. We do 16,000 people a year. And I arrived here, and let's say I stayed for 1.5 months. And because the whole situation started unbundling itself as I started meeting people here and started realizing not only the urgency of the opportunity, but the potential immenseness. I wouldn't say there was any guarantees made, but we understood that long term it could be a potentially huge opportunity.
Let's just maybe pull back and explain. I explained at the beginning why the Israeli economy was lacking workers, but maybe just let's put to the fact that, for example, construction halted. So it's very, I think people outside of Israel don't completely understand that after October 7th, no buildings were being built in Israel. Like almost zero construction was happening here. A country that's growing at a very fast rate. People are getting married. Even with the war, people are having kids. People are, they want to move out of their homes. They want to build new homes. Schools need to be built, factories need to be built. So just on the construction side, the entire country just collapsed. And then you come in and people are talking to you and you realize, as I understand what you're saying, the urgency of where the entire country is at.
Yeah, it's actually, I would say construction's not the only thing that stopped. I remember arriving at
probably
Ben Gurion Airport. Like I was the only guy in the airport, it was like a surreal experience. Yeah. And for many months, I was the only guy in the hotel, which is only foreigner in the hotel. So, but yeah, as I'm an engineer and I'm a curious person by nature. When I arrive to a place, I like to walk around, take a look, and I arrived and there were tower cranes attached to buildings. They were not functioning. At night, I could see there's no movement. And, you take a drive past some of the gates of the construction sites and you find equipment and materials in the same position. These are signs that nothing is moving. Of course,
yeah.
As I started to get deeper and understanding, I met with the people from the Tagdut Kablamin,
which is the for our English listeners, the association of construction people who work in construction.
It's the Association of Construction Companies,
yes.
And they represent about, I think, 4,000 construction companies to the market.
Did you also meet with the government here?
We met with some of the government officials. I wouldn't say ministers per se, but these officials were more or less representing, I believe, the views of the ministries.
And what were they telling you at the time, a month after October 7th?
There's let's say there were 3 vectors that I was engaging with. One vector was Itagdut Kablamin, the IBA as it's called, Israel Builders Association.
Yeah.
And their guidance was that their membership business had ceased. Construction is they weren't telling me. I have run my own construction company out of Dubai. Construction companies have very slim revenues. You cannot survive for months without work. So even before they told me, I understood that the oxygen's running out for these companies. So the urgency was clear to me. I also had the good fortune to be introduced by the IBA to the head of the caregiving, of the HR companies, as they're called. These are the companies that
Provide the workers.
these are the companies authorized by the government to bring in foreign workers. So Israel has a very special system where only certain companies are allowed to bring foreign workers in. And I met, they introduced me to a gentleman called Eldad Nitzan. I learned the word tagid from him, and a lot of things I learned from
Corporation.
a lot of words I learned from these folks, and then certain members of the government. So on the three vectors, what was being expressed was there a vacuum has been created of epic proportions after October 7th. The incumbent workforce, which happened to be the Palestinians, were no longer allowed to come back into the country. Everything had ceased. The entire industry was reliant on those folks, and they needed to rapidly restart the machinery. And for that, Indian workers was a great hope for them to get the machinery restarted. So these are the super urgency. And I would say, like, some of the people whose names I've mentioned from these organizations, I mean, these people, they worked relentlessly. They were, even with me, they were relentless. They wouldn't leave me alone. And so I think there's a debt of gratitude the industry has to such people, Israel Builders Association, the Association of the Tagids, who really made it happen, because you need people to push it through. Because I understood the urgency, but we're a private business and we like to move at our own pace, and they didn't like the pace we wanted to move at, so they wanted to accelerate us. So this is what happened.
Right. So then you go back to India after all the meetings that you're having here, understanding the urgency, and they're talking to you. How do you, just logistically, how does it work? Do you bring workers that want to find a job outside of India, and you're telling them, come to Israel. Israel is a good opportunity, but I assume a lot of Indians know what's happening in Israel. Why I mean, a lot of people ran away. I was in America just now, and I was meeting a friend, and they had for their elderly parents a caretaker, and not from India, from Czech Republic or something. And it turned out that she ran away after October 7th. She said, I'm too scared, and she went to America, and they hired her there. But you're saying Indian workers, you're to Israel, and they say, okay, we're coming. Why do they come? They could find work in other countries, probably.
So it's again a very, very interesting question you ask, Ariel. So firstly, to get the chronology right, when I arrived here November 15th to around the 1st of December was spent trying to conduct a needs analysis, to conduct a reconnaissance of the market, to really understand what the market needs. During this time, the official process of the B2B workers had not been announced by the Israeli government. So around the 1st of December, the process was announced on how the B2B foreign workers would be brought in. So the first 15 days were more raising awareness about what's available in India, what do we do, how it's done, what can be expected, etc., and also trying to figure out what do you guys want in Israel, and to try to align expectations. 15th to 1st was spent in that process. 1st December to about 15 December, once the process was announced, I was literally the only Indian in this business in this country, and was spent driving up and down from Hadera to Gadera, meeting people to get orders from them. And within a short span of time, we received orders for 6,000 to 7,000 people from the existing Tagidim. Today, they are 190 Tagids. At that time, there was 47 of them. And because I would say that, the need was high, I was in the right place at the right time, timing is important, we got these orders. So then, as I said, we're a business of family. My brother was in India. We work very closely together. We have for 25 years. And I conveyed back, what it is that we were looking to do. And the urgency was high. And it was very difficult to to meet the expectations. Israelis want everything yesterday. This is the thing what I've learned here. There's not even today.
And India works at a different time.
Yeah, Indian we don't, and not only India, but our company. We work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and when they think about human resources, they're thinking 6 months, they're planning ahead. Israel is everything is at, what I've learned is like the companies like the Samsung Engineering or Hyundai Engineering, they're running marathons, but the Israelis run marathon in a series of 100-meter sprints. This is how it is. But back to where we were, and 15th December onwards, we started the execution of the orders in India. Now we're going to get into the details of what the challenges were. Firstly, we lined up something like 7,000 people within 2 weeks to be tested, because the Israel Builders Association was adamant that before the end of the year, they want to test 10,000 people in India.
What does it mean to test that they have the qualifications to work in construction?
And maybe we should rewind a bit. The process of bringing foreign workers in India, from India to Israel, we already talked about the Tagidim, the HR companies, they're authorized to bring them. But there's another layer. The Israel Builders Association plays the role of quality control and approver. So they need to send qualified Israeli personnel to India to conduct physical examinations of people doing the work that they would eventually do in Israel.
Wow.
So we have to set up what we call trade tests or trade examinations. So they wanted to come to India to test circa 10,000 people within a span of days. And they wanted us to line up all these guys, and then by this time, of course, being a free and fair marketplace, they had conveyed, our embassy and others had conveyed the need to our peers as well in India. And our peers also jumped in to participate in this process. But I can only speak for our account. So without a single advertisement, because we've sent 500,000 people, we send 16,000 people a year, and our mantra in our business is we're looking to, most of the people we send overseas, Israel is a unique case where the contract is for 5 years. Most countries where we're sending people, the contract is 1 or 2 years. And we're in a business of constantly recirculating those people between our clients. So without a single advertisement, we lined up 7,000 people to be tested starting.
How did they know, like, just as a social thing, where did people hear about this?
So we have, and as a company, this is really the vision of my father that we have to be thankful for, where his vision always was that, we need to be directly connected with the workers and directly connected with the clients. So as an organization, we have 300 employees in recruitment, which is, if you know a bit about recruitment, it's a massive number. And we have facilities all across India. We have 8 offices. We're very close to the catchment areas where we find workers. We're very deep into the Middle Eastern region, in places like Dubai, Saudi Arabia, where 9 million Indian workers work in these regions. So for us, we have a software where we have WhatsApp engines where we can connect to our people very directly, socialize the opportunity to them. We don't need to go to public advertisements. And oftentimes we need to engage them in conversation with us because it's the first time in their journey that they're hearing about Israel. Right. Previously they're working.
But were there people that came and said, we want to go specifically to Israel because we feel, I'm just like, once they knew about Israel, they heard about Israel, let's say for the first time, and some of them, I assume, did Google and they said Israel, oh my God.
So I would say the vast number of people were in the OMG kind of, phase, because, India is a poor country. And given, if you're well resourced in your country, you have a good salary, you're happy with your family.
You're not going.
Perhaps people wouldn't go as foreign workers overseas, right? People go because there's a need. It's an economic need that drives them. In most cases, in a few cases, it's a need to widen their profile and portfolio to demonstrate they have international experience. But they can do that anywhere. It doesn't need to be Israel. So I would say in the broad group of people, we found some interesting characters. Those who had meta palettes in Israel, they wanted to go to Israel because they were talking to people they knew in Israel. So families of meta palettes, because Israel has
Wait,
almost
metapelet is the caretakers.
it's the
for,
caregivers, right?
The
I'm
caregivers
sorry,
for elderly people.
Yeah,
You're talking in Hebrew already.
I've drunk the Kool-Aid here, so I'm in Hebrew now.
So caretakers for elderly people and people who are sick,
so there's
etc.
15,000 of them in India.
Yeah.
And they come from certain regions. When we found workers from those regions, immediately they were like, yeah, I'm ready to go.
We know people
my friends, cousins in Ramat Gan, and I hear everything's okay, and there's missiles, but everybody's safe. So we had this one group of people, and which was quite, even our staff was like scratching their heads and saying, what the hell's wrong with these guys? They didn't even want more information.
They heard good things.
They didn't want information. They're like, just send me. Okay, this is one group of people. But the vast majority of people were skeptical. So now this is where our role as an HR company and as a brand name comes in. We've been a brand name for 50 years. We worked in 30 countries. And in India, the decision to send a worker overseas, it's a family decision. Many of the workers that we sent, we've once sent the father to work in Saudi Arabia or, some other country. So we have relationships with them. And we engaged in conversations with them. We started talking to people at a mass scale, explaining to them that the principal approach we used, and one of the things that my father always used to say was, we will not send people anywhere where we will not go ourselves. So the principal approach that our team used was to say, our owner is in Israel right now. Our owner has 3 kids. He has a family. He's going to be there. He will receive you at the airport, which I did on 13th February. The first worker arrived at Ben Gurion. I personally received that worker or that group of workers. So we made those commitments to people, and our company is a brand name in this industry. So they believed us, and they said, okay, we'll take a leap of faith. Because also the salary was quite high. But arguably, you can get high salaries to become a mercenary in Afghanistan, but nobody is doing these things, So people, it's not just about salaries.
Is the salary high, obviously relative to India, but is it a good salary also for Israelis? Like if an Israeli would work in this field, it would be a good salary for him too, right?
So, okay, so let me unpack your question. So for Israel's, last I checked, Israel's per capita income is circa $50,000 to $55,000 a year.
Yeah.
The minimum wage in this country is circa $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. While there are many Israelis working in this industry, Israel is also a country of educated people. Most people in this country
have degrees, and
they have degrees. And what happens in most countries where we work is when people are educated, they move on to careers that are more appropriate for their education. So we're sending a lot of people to Europe these days, and a lot of European people are, highly qualified, and they can get a better income in career streams which are more knowledge-based industries.
And not physical labor.
And not physical industries. And in some countries, the model's flipping. Today, if you want to make £150,000 a year in London, or maybe $130,000 in New York, become a plumber.
Exactly.
But the model,
because there's a need.
There's a need. The model has started to flip because over a period of time, people have gone into intellectual pursuits, and these have been shunned.
And I'll just put it that a lot of the intellectual pursuits have zero money in them. For example, all the social sciences, like stuff that I studied, I have a lot of friends that, you have even a master's, a PhD, but no one wants you. You have nothing to offer. So I think that...
Okay, so now you're getting into something funny because when we sit in India and we see a lot of protests happening outside universities where people are paying $100,000 a year, and and we're sitting like really wondering, because we come from a country like, there's no options like these, like there's no, of course, for sure everybody should be for human rights, etc. But like
Go get a job.
Yeah, well, in our country, everybody was saying like, how is it that these people concurrently have $100,000 a year to spend on an Ivy League education and also have the option not to work or get expelled from a university
Or study,
or
'cause you're outside.
so we were all a little bit flummoxed by this effect, and it's the world we're living in now.
So, so wait, you didn't the salary is good for
Sure.
Indians, obviously, but the per capita here is higher. But also, I think one thing we should say is that Israelis don't want to work in these jobs, like you said. But if they would, the salary would be fine. It's just that they don't. There's not a.
I would like. I can't speak for Israelis. I can speak to the empirical evidence that I see. The Israelis who are in the construction industry, they're qualified. They're either supervisors, they're engineers, they're managers, they're have deep expertise in modern construction techniques. So this is, where the Israelis have found their place in leading from the front of this construction industry. Now, of course, to build a building, you need a great architect and engineers, but then you need the workforce. And I think like at 5,600 shekels a month for 182 hours is the minimum wage here. And the foreign worker makes about 7,700 shekels when you
makes
add
higher than the minimum wage.
Minimum wage because they work 236 hours. Because it's mandatory to work overtime because the Israeli government has been very clever. They don't want to disincentivize the companies to start hiring cheap labor. So they've said that, okay, right, you have a need. Well, okay, fine, bring in people, but then you're going to need to pay them a minimum amount for 236 hours if the need really is so acute. But so that's where the 2,000 circa dollars of gross income comes from. And I mean, to close this point, and we're circling around your question, I believe that the opportunity set that Israelis have is for careers and jobs that pay far more than the construction industry. That's why you don't see them there.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting to ask is the culture shock. So, putting aside the Indian workers who have family from here before that were excited, they knew about what was happening here. They had a sort of contacts here. What were because Israel's, like you said, they want everything now. They're very loud, and some would say rude, but we're not going to say anything here, but very, very direct. Let's put it that way. And very demanding, maybe also. And then the Indian people, like you said, you explained, you have a very, we're very accepting, we're very laid back, tolerant, we're not fighters, we're not confrontational more. But then they come here. What were the challenges that you saw?
So just a sort of interesting point you raised there, like one of the contrasts between Israeli culture and Indian culture is that Israeli will tell you right away on your face what he thinks or she thinks about a situation, and generally Indians, we will not. Our culture is we're very very, very mindful, we're very diplomatic, we're very nice, and it's also very deeply ingrained into us. And I would say that we need to learn to be more direct as people. It's an important.
And we need to learn to be a little more laid back.
Okay, well, we learn something from each other, hopefully, through this journey. But so the culture shocks. I would say, and it goes into the types of workers. So when I understood the needs here, my brother and I, we discussed the types of worker we would send. The approximately 3,500 workers that we've delivered into this market have an average of 10 years experience and 4 years international experience. Okay. So these workers have worked in countries like Saudi Arabia, Oman, all these,
which in a lot of ways are similar in the way they interact with each other.
Okay, intuitively it may seem that way, but it's not. It's a counterintuitive situation,
right?
But I'll come back to that. I'll circle back to that later. But just to tell you that these folks because adaptability is a quality in a human, and a culture shock is a function of adaptability. You'll have a culture shock if your adaptability is low because you're suddenly faced with new things and you're having a hard time accepting them. But if you have a worker who's worked in Bahrain, and then he's been in Saudi Arabia, and then after that he worked in Africa,
Right.
what happens is that they're now kind of expecting to see something strange. So a lot of the workers that arrived here, the culture shock was pleasant.
Uh-huh.
It was a very pleasant culture shock. I'll explain why. The GCC countries, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, they are great destinations for Indian workers to work there. 9 million Indians work in these countries, very successful. India has very close relations with these countries, and many people have built their lives working in these countries. These countries have very small populations, and what they do is that they have created a separate infrastructure for workers. So they have, let's say, worker villages, and where workers are accommodated. They have all their facilities available to them. They have the foods that are familiar to them provided to them. It's great. If you and
But they're not part of the actual population of the country.
So the premise is that the premise they're operating on is they're a foreign worker. The premise they're operating on is we have a need that we need to build. You have an economic need, and let's align our needs and maximize. So the workers are living in an optimized manner, which they're very comfortable. There's sometimes in Israel, there's some, let's say, misconceptions of how workers are treated there. I can put my hand up and say they're treated very well there.
Here.
And in these countries, in the Gulf countries, they're treated very well there. But they're not necessarily experiencing the local culture. Now, if you take a look at a country like Qatar, the population of Qatar is 300,000. The total population of the country is 1.6 million. So, and the Qataris live in they have, they're more executives and managers, and the workers are not interacting with them.
Right.
So the surprising thing which the workers found is they're now integrated into an urban environment. They're living in a building with apartments of Israeli families. This was a new effect for them. And it was a very pleasant effect because they were treated very well. They were welcomed. A lot of workers told me that there's people talking to them in the supermarkets and curious.
They're not used?
They're not used to that, because I'll tell you why they're not used to that, because 60% of construction workers in a place like Dubai are Indian. So the only people they run into supermarkets are more Indians,
Right.
And the Emirati population is about 10%. 90% are foreigners in the country. So you have more foreigners than the locals, and probably where they run into the locals are at the workplace environment, but not in the social environment.
Right.
And so this was a new effect for them, and it was quite pleasant because they were welcomed, and they were, and I would say, like, as a person who's traveled across the world, Israel is one of the few countries, and I say this genuinely, not because I'm here. And I say this not because I feel it. I always gauge it based on our blue-collar workers, because they're in the lower economic stratas of society, and often they're not well treated in countries where they go to. But when workers are telling me, and I also at the same time feel that this is a country where Indians are welcome.
Mm-hmm. We also have an Indian Jewish population here.
Yes, which we were introduced to later on, because it's a hidden thing. We didn't know about it. But yeah, there's a strong Indian Jewish population. They understand the Indian culture. They've resided here for many years. So that's the point I'm making, is that I have felt welcome here. The workers have felt welcome here. And generally, like, I'll give you two kind of anecdotes. One anecdote is that one of the workers worked for a mega construction company in Saudi Arabia, where we placed the worker. And the worker I was asking him, how's it going? And he said, I'm dealing directly with the owner of the company. And I worked in Saudi Arabia for 8 years. I never saw the owners, And I hear the owner came to my apartment and we had a problem. He solved it. And it was a novelty for them. And I tried to explain to him that the owners of the company were working in Saudi Arabia. They're billionaires. So we meet with the execs, but the owners are,
He might not
publicly
even be in the
listed
country.
companies. They're mega players globally. So maybe we don't get to meet them. So it was quite an interesting effect there.
I wanted to ask, did you teach the workers, or at least some of them, Hebrew before they came, or have some sort of, just for the new ones, not the ones maybe that know people here, but people, was there sort of, did you have anything like that?
Yeah. So whenever we send workers to a new country, we have a cultural orientation program, and we have a specialist language training program. Now, we were working at breakneck speed, so we couldn't exactly in 2 weeks, all the Israelis wanted us to build these programs yesterday, but this takes time. So we developed a program called Shalom Namaste. It's a program. We developed a training program and an app. So the training program is for before they depart, and the app is for after they arrive in this country. And so we imparted them cultural orientation, history, do's, don'ts, about Judaism, just so that because people in India, they're familiar with Christianity, familiar with Islam. The Indians' familiarity, the average guy's familiarity with Judaism is very low. It's a mystery to them,
Yes.
Even though if you were to drive around Mumbai, you would see things like Sassoon docks, but people don't know, and a lot of the Jews, made Aliyah and came to Israel after Israel was formed. They were Zionists, many of them. So the cultural orientation program was there. And I should add, I've just arrived this morning from Elat. I was in the, in the Merkazim Hanadlan conference that happens there. And this was a topic of discussion because I met with some of the leaders of some of the largest companies in Israel discussing about the workers. And I believe, and our company is prepared to make the investment to make an Israeli center of excellence in India, where we can move our Shalom Namaste program, cultural training, but also add to it the specific construction techniques that are used in Israel, so that these professional workers who have experiences, they can be adapted to the Israeli environment before they depart on their journey. And I think it's a very important thing that we must do, and we're trying to partner with some of the largest companies to make this happen. Right?
Nice. Very. One more thing shortly is the Israel is known, at least for Israelis. Tell me what you think. We think we have, and I think it's all the studies show Israel is very regulatory, is very difficult. The government likes to make things difficult for you. So maybe just tell us, in the beginning, we spoke with Tzvi here that there's 100,000 people that needs to come. There's a need for 100,000 workers. Only about 15,000 came from India. And I assume the reason is there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is probably because it's very difficult to do it, just bureaucratically speaking.
So, I like, if we take a step back from all of this, right? And we have to be fair. Okay. What happened on October 7th was a shock to the system.
Yeah.
The system that existed prior to that was designed to do something else. It was designed to work with the workers coming from Palestine.
Which is right across those. Yeah.
Right. So the machinery that was set up was optimized to deal with the previous scenario. After the terror attacks, a new scenario developed, and the machinery, governmental machinery, had to adapt itself to the new scenario. So I'm trying to be fair that, yes, before arriving in Israel, I thought that India was the world's heavyweight champion of regulations. But let's say Israel is also a contender in the WWE of regulations, but definitely very regulated environment. But to be fair, I think imagine the application for and each worker is 65 pages. I mean, it's easier to send a worker to the UK. We send nurses to the United Kingdom. It's a simpler process, right? It's here.
65 pages that he needs to write his.
Let's say 65 pages. It's the employment contract alone is 30 plus pages. The medical report required is 8 pages. There's an affidavit that's 4 pages. There's a numerous forms that are put
And in
together.
other countries, it's much smaller.
In some countries, like let's say, let's go examples. The Europeans have standardized the system, so it's a simplified, standardized system, and they don't require that heavy paperwork. And I would say, like the Gulf countries, like UAE and Saudi, they have a completely digitized process. They're super sophisticated. They have linkages, API linkages with Indian governmental systems. So oftentimes, when you do a medical test for going to a Gulf country, you may not need to present the physical report. They can actually get the report digitally without you having to do anything.
Right.
But Israel hasn't had the time. Given time, I believe this system will, like all systems, will reach an equilibrium that's optimized. We're not there yet. It is very. You cannot imagine how many thousands. If you think about it, to send. If you start doing some simple math, like 7,000 people, 65 pages, we're talking about 45,000, 450,000. I don't know the numbers.
A lot of trees.
It's a lot of, so it's a lot of pages. And I'm very proud of our team that in a short span of time, we made this happen. But then there's also genuine concerns about security. So your Israeli government requires very strict security background checks, and it's understandable. So maybe some other countries don't have the same amount of rigor in terms of security checks.
But how come, because you said 7,000 people signed up in the beginning.
Yeah.
Only 3,500 came at the end are here right now.
Yeah.
Is the reason really that a lot of them maybe didn't want to go through with all this paperwork and security stuff and just the hassle when they could, like you said, go to other countries?
No. It's far from that case. So first of all, 7,000 people didn't sign up. Let's say a few hundred people signed up, and we had to convince the 6,500 people about the merits of this Israeli opportunity and to take a leap of faith with us. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is that during this journey, there have been disruptions of many kinds, flight disruptions.
Yes.
There's you live in a very friendly neighborhood where a lot of things happen, very unannounced. So you've had the Iranian attacks and various two of them which disrupted movements. And then there's another reason. We operate in the B2B channel. It's a business-to-business channel where we deal directly with Israeli businesses and provide people directly to them. There is another channel at play, and it's called the G2G channel or the bilateral channel. And so we focus on 10 years experienced, 4 years international experience people. But the G2G channel focuses on a much younger. So the most people that I've seen, we're not involved in the G2G, but the people I see who've come from India here are in the age range of 20 to 25. They're very young. They're not as experienced as the B2B workers. And I would say the vast, maybe majority of them don't have international experience. So B2B was first out of the gates, and the first people started to arrive from the B2B channel. And later, a large quantum of people started to arrive through the G2G channel. And since they were young, they're good people, the great intentions to bring young blood into the market, but the absorption of them was very slow because these people may not have the skills and the absorption cycle. So 10,000 of those guys have arrived. In fact, by some accounts, by this time, maybe 30,000 should have arrived. So the absorption cycle was very slow due to a deficit of skills. And then as I've explained to you, the entity that brings in Indian foreign workers is actually an HR company. And the end consumer of our workers are the construction companies.
Right.
So the construction companies are actually disintermediated from the workers. So they actually don't know whether it's B2B, G2G. They have no idea. The HR company provides the people to them. And so once they started receiving people who may not be ready to hit the ground running, they slowed down the absorption process. So regulations played a role. This was an issue. The incidents and the geopolitical risks, the flights played a role, because at one time, you may want to bring in people, but there was no flight capacity. There was not even organizing a charter from India to Israel was a challenge. So there was numerous logistical challenges, numerous regulatory challenges, but then the end consumer started to have some dissonance when they started to find certain people were needed to be trained. So they couldn't bring in a large number and start training them. As a result of that, I believe the B2B also went into slowdown, even though we were all our company and our peers, we were providing experienced people. So 5,000 B2B people arrived and 10,000 G2G have arrived now.
Right. And like we said, you're the biggest one of the B2B,
That's right.
3,500.
That's right.
So Sameer Khosla, I want to say that this has been very, very, very illuminating, interesting. And I think we can also extrapolate that from this is an opening for more cooperation between Israel and India on the business side. Because I remember your prime minister was here, Prime Minister Modi. He was here, I met with his people when they came. It was very, very interesting. But this is more on the person-to-person level. Like you said, people from maybe not businessmen, regular people from in Israel, from the streets. The regular person on the street is coming here, meeting us, we're meeting them, living in the same apartment buildings. So there's something very, very nice about it, other than the business side of things.
No, for sure. I mean, on the business and the governmental side of things, there's a very clear positivity towards Israel. And just a few days ago, our external affairs minister was challenged about exchanging, let's say, certain aspects of trade with Israel, which some elements of the government are not happy about.
Yeah.
And he was quite clear that he said Israel has, his words, I paraphrased them, but he said Israel has stood with India when others did not stand with India, and now it's our turn to pay the favor back.
Yeah.
So from a governmental level, and the Prime Minister Modi has always been bullish about this relationship. A lot of Israelis come to India after their military service, so Indians are familiar with them. And now a lot of Israelis who didn't go to India will become familiar.
Yes.
So I think it's great.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, and I'm privileged and blessed to be part of this journey.
And we are privileged and blessed to have you with us. So it was a very, very interesting conversation. And I thank you so much for being with us. And I think let's just put it to our listeners and viewers. If you have any questions, send me and I will relay them to Sameer, because I assume we'll get some questions about how things work, different, even business opportunities, maybe about this whole thing, questions people may have.
We are here to build the relationship between our countries. Even if it's something that's doesn't benefit us, if we can help people with information to introduce people to other opportunities in India, feel free.
Yes.
Feel free.
So Sameer, like you heard, Sameer Khosla, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you guys so much for watching our show. You could obviously find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, all the, I think we're on like 50 channels, the apps. So, and I think also usually we don't do a lot of business on the podcast, even though I work at a business newspaper, but this is business and culture, diplomacy, etc., public diplomacy, you could call this. So thank you so much for watching us, and we'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thanks for tuning in to the Western Spirit podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. See you next time.